Prince William stood at the edge of something he could not yet name, a quiet disturbance that slipped through the rigid structure of royal life without resistance. It began not with noise, but with absence. The absence of alarm, of error, of anything that should have accompanied such a breach. An envelope rested on the handle of his private car, placed with a precision that felt almost intimate. Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, where every movement is measured and every presence accounted for, such a detail was not just unusual, it was impossible. Yet he did not call for security. He did not summon advisors or demand explanations. Instead, he moved forward as if nothing had shifted, as if the ground beneath him remained steady. But in truth, something had already changed, because when he opened the envelope later, alone, the message did not shout, it whispered. And sometimes whispers carry further than screams. "You do not deserve to be king." The words settled into him, not as an attack, but as a seed. And that was their purpose, not to provoke, but to linger. 2 days later, the pattern revealed itself. The same placement, the same silence. But this time, it was not a single envelope. It was a folder, heavier, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Whoever was behind it was no longer testing boundaries. They were expanding them. Inside were fragments of his life, carefully distorted, images reshaped to suggest distance, to imply detachment, to construct a version of him that felt just close enough to truth to be believable. It was not an accusation. It was a narrative being built piece by piece. Then came something more unsettling. Private moments, unseen angles, glimpses of spaces that existed far beyond public access. His children, his routines, his solitude. This was no longer about perception. This was observation. And still, William remained composed. Not because he was unaware, but because awareness, in this case, demanded patience. Fear would have been expected. Reaction would have been predictable. But he chose neither. Because something deeper was taking shape. Something colder than fear. Understanding. The third intrusion did not arrive quietly in the same way. It arrived with intention. A small velvet box, placed as though it belonged there. As though it had always been waiting. Inside, there was no ambiguity. A crushed miniature car. A photograph of a tunnel in Paris. And a note written in a hand that felt disturbingly familiar. This was no longer a suggestion. It was a memory weaponized. The past had been reached into, reshaped, and placed directly before him. Not to remind him, but to destabilize him. To pull at something unresolved. To fracture certainty. And in that moment, the truth revealed itself fully. This was not random. This was not emotional. This was strategy. Every move calculated. Every message designed not just to reach him, but to reshape him. Someone was not trying to break in. Someone was already inside. So William did something unexpected. He did nothing. At least, nothing visible. He allowed the routine to continue unchanged. The same schedules, the same movements, the same calm exterior. But beneath that stillness, a quiet shift had begun. The game was no longer being played on the surface. It had moved into something deeper, something controlled. 3 individuals, trusted beyond question, were placed within the shadows of the palace itself. Not as guards, but as observers. Silent, patient, waiting. And then, just as before, the intruder returned. The same confidence, the same absence of hesitation. A presence that no longer behaved like an outsider, but like someone who belonged. And that was the mistake, because familiarity breeds exposure. As the figure reached for the car, the illusion collapsed. Movement emerged from stillness. Control replaced chaos, and within seconds, the one who had moved unseen was no longer invisible. He had not been hunting. He had been guided. What followed was not resistance. It was release. Words came quickly, almost urgently, as though silence carried a greater danger than confession. And then, a name, not spoken with force, but with weight. The kind of weight that shifts everything it touches. Camilla. The room did not react. It stilled, because the implications did not need explanation. The access, the precision, the knowledge, it all aligned in a way that felt too structured to deny. When she entered, it was not into accusation, but into evidence. Each piece laid out with care. Each detail forming a pattern that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Denial came as it always does. But denial requires stability. And stability had already been lost. Because truth has a way of revealing itself not in grand moments, but in the smallest fractures. A pause, a hesitation, a shift in certainty. And that was enough. The decision, when it arrived, did not echo. It settled, quiet, controlled, final. Not driven by emotion, but by necessity. Because what had unfolded was not merely betrayal. It was something far more dangerous. A breach not of walls, but of trust. Not of security, but of foundation. And as the doors closed behind her, the palace did not return to normal. Because something had been uncovered that could not be unseen. The realization that the greatest threats do not always come from beyond the gates. Sometimes they are already inside, waiting, watching, and choosing the exact moment to step forward.